Namaste children, will be continuing the second part of this MCQs on reproduction. We did this question number 15. Those of you who missed the first 15 questions from RNNEET as a part of your NEET preparation, we have given you a lot of hints. I would like you to go back. Ali Hoki Nodi part 1 reproduction, where a lot of important questions have been covered. The first 15 questions, these are all very good, tough questions. They are challenging questions from NCERT for your NEET preparations on the topic human reproduction. It is going to be a one lovely revision, and it's going to also tell you a lot of important points where you might want to note how to basically keep your mistake book. As I told you, keep your mistake book next to you and start writing down all the mistakes that you're doing. Not only the correct answer in that, but also write down the answer that you actually made a mistake and what actually that mistake represents. We will come to some of that this as we do some more questions. So e question now nodidre basically the previous question part of that, if you look at it, the sperm part of the mitochondria, we said to question number 15 was basically the middle piece. Now other important question which I left you there was the sperm actually in the neck of it has two centrioles. There is a proximal centriole and a distal centriole. What is the role of each of these centriole? There is a proximal centriole and a distal centriole. Okay, so what is the role of each of these centriole? Please put it in the comment section. Would like to see more of it. What is the role of the distal centriole? The distal centriole, because it's distal means proximal means closer to the head. Distal means further away from the head. So the one that is closer to the head has a function, whereas the one that is distal to it maintains the axial filament. Now this particular tail which you see here is actually covered, and there is a central filament which is actually running through it. So the central filament, like how you have the nerve followed by the myelin sheath which is covered, very similarly you have the central axial filament which runs through it, and that axial filament of the tail is maintained by the distal centriole. So the distal centriole maintains the axial filament of the tail. Okay, right? So we're just putting that here. You might want to write these things down in your mistake notebook itself. The mistake notebook need not be having only your mistake, but also these additional points which may not be written clearly in NCERT, but these are important points you need to remember. The proximal centriole plays a very important role. When does the role of this proximal centriole play? Now this proximal centriole, when there is fusion, remember, when there is fertilization and fusion, okay, this proximal centriole comes in along with the nucleus. The sperm head basically opens and the nucleus enters the ovum, and when that enters the ovum, what happens? If you basically take remember the fertilization steps, basically after the nucleus enters the nucleus of the ovum, at that particular time this proximal centriole also enters in. So the proximal centriole also enters in. So when the proximal centriole also enters in, it allows the formation of the zygote, and then it is responsible for the first cleavage of the zygote. The zygote has to break into two parts, into two cells. So the first division of the zygote comes from the proximal centriole. So the proximal centriole facilitates the first division of the fastest division of the zygote. So remember this point, that the first division of the zygote comes from the proximal centriole. Perfect, right? Great. We'll go to the next question. Pregnancy test detects. Okay, there are a number of pregnancy tests, but we know the typical gravidas test, or also known as the pregnancy test. It will detect which hormone. Does it detect the progesterone? Does it detect the LH, the HCG, or the estrogen? Now, one of the simple things is the regular menstruation has got estrogen and progesterone as well as LH, but LH is generally not seen clinically, so that any particular menstruation will detect these hormones. What is one hormone that comes only after pregnancy, and that is the HCG, which is liberated by the placenta, by the chorionic villi of the placenta. So the HCG is one thing that is liberated by the chorionic villi of the placenta, right? So that is what you will have to remember, and so that is the answer, right? So it's liberated by the chorionic villi in the placenta. Okay, placenta ali sumaru matyadalli you get these small finger like projections, chote chote finger like projections aate hain, and these are responsible for formation of HCG. Okay, right. Okay, another interesting question from the reproductive health. There are a few questions from reproductive health, though we are going to have a separate video for reproductive health. उसके लिए separate video बनाएंगे, अदरल separate questions इरते, because that's a very important chapter. But the hormone releasing IUD basically intrauterine device. We know that copper T is one of them, Lippes loop is one, multilode 375 is also one, LNG is one. Now, you know copper T and multilode 375, these both have got copper. Okay, Lippes loop. What is typically Lippes loop? It is a non-medicated. So it's a non-medicated IUD. The words Nyapka what is Lippes loop? It's a non-medicated IUD. And what is LNG? That is your hormone releasing IUD. So the answer here is C. Answer is C. C is your answer. LNG20. What does LNG represent? What does LNG represent? It represents levonorgestrel. Levonorgestrel. Okay, perfect. गुड मकले बच्चों लोग, एक इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चन है यहाँ पे आपको. मल्टीलोड 375 ये क्वेश्चन के लिए नहीं है. मल्टीलोड 375, ये 375 क्या है? व्हाट डज इट रिप्रेजेंट? और यहाँ पे LNG 20 है, ये 20 किस लिए है? Can you put this, what this represents in the comment box? Comment में डालो कि ये 375 क्या represent करता है और ये 20 क्या represent करता है. Okay, so it could be LNG 30, LNG 40, anything, but why is it given as LNG 20? और यहाँ पे 3 multilode 375 डाला है, तो ये 375 क्या होता है? This 375 represents the amount of surface area of copper that is available. You know, जो copper का IUD है multilode, उसमें कितना square millimeter, how many square millimeter of copper is available, and that is 375 square millimeter is available. Okay, so the same way, what does 20 represent in LNG? What does LNG stand for? Levonorgestrel. What is it? Is it, I told you, it is levonorgestrel, right? Now that levonorgestrel, why is it given 20? Is it 20 square millimeter? No. Here it is copper, so it is 375 square millimeter. Whereas here it is 20 microgram. 20 microgram of this particular hormone. Which hormone? Levonorgestrel is available. Okay, got it? So you got two other very interesting questions as a sub question of this particular question. तो इस तरह से आपको पढ़ना चाहिए कि एक क्वेश्चन लिया, सिर्फ वो क्वेश्चन का आंसर मत देखो, आपको थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे अंदर क्वेश्चन के अंदर वही चॉइसेस से और क्या क्वेश्चंस आ सकता है वहां से लेके ऐसे सब क्वेश्चंस बनाओ, अपने खुद का सब क्वेश्चंस बनाओ. सो वी आर गोइंग टू ट्राई टू see and make out a lot more questions and bring about more thinking ideas by which you can understand the chapter in a much better manner. This is going to be the speciality of RNNEET. Okay, right. Okay, another important question on menstruation. Event in the proliferative phase. This is straightforward, simple question. Proliferative phase of the, so proliferative phase, what are the phases of menstruation? There are two kinds of phases you need to know here. यहाँ पे you call it, you divide it basically, if I were to put it into two parts, okay, so we will divide it into one part of the endometrium phase, okay, the uterine phases, and the in the particular ovary what happens, so the ovarian phases. So menstruation, if you want to learn, you remember it in these two parts, that is uterine phase and ovarian phase. The uterine phase, what is the first part? Basically, when ovary में follicle is getting formed, okay, follicles आता है there, so that is called the follicular phase. Follicular phase. The same time in the uterine, what do you get? You call it the what phase? The proliferative phase. Correct. Then you have the ovulatory phase here. At that time, do you have any phase in the uterine? No. At that time also there is proliferation. Then the ovary becomes the luteum or the luteal phase. At that time what happens here? There is secretion. There is more secretion of the endometrium. So more amount of hormones are released. There is secretion coming from the endometrial cells. So secretory phase. Then what is there? Next phase. The first few days of the ovarian phase again starts. So the first 4 days of the ovarian phase is the menstrual phase. So the uterine phases are proliferative, secretory and menstrual. And during menstrual, what phase you get? The follicular phase again. Okay, the first 4 days are the ovarian phase is the follicular phase. And then you get the ovulatory phase and the luteal phase. So these three are the ovarian phases, these are the uterine phases. Event in the proliferative phase means it represents the uterus. So you're going to be think of what is going to happen to the uterus, not of the ovary. Is there endometrial shedding? That will take place during menstruation. Corpus luteal formation, that is because in the ovary, it is not in the endometrium. Ovulation, again in the ovary. Endometrial regeneration, so there is more amount of endometrial cells formed, so that is the answer. So you very important to remember menstrual phase into two parts, the uterine phases and the ovarian phases, right? So remember these two, and then based on that any of the questions on menstruation can be easily done. Zona pellucida is found in, now you know zona pellucida is what? It is a covering of the ovum. When the ovum is released, that is basically your secondary oocyte is released, you have the zona pellucida which is covering it, right? So the zona pellucida covers the secondary oocyte or the haploid oocyte. So the haploid ovum is covered by the zona pellucida. You know that it is covered by the zona pellucida which has to be penetrated by the sperm. So once it penetrates, the zona pellucida is gone, so the zygote cannot have the zona pellucida. Secondary oocyte, or they can also call this as a haploid ovum, or they can also call it as the part of the tertiary follicle. Remember that the tertiary follicle has the zona pellucida. The primary follicle, it only contains certain germ cells. It contains only germ cells, okay, with the central nucleus. It does not have any zona pellucida. So the primary follicle does not have. Then the next is secondary follicle. Will zona pellucida be present in the secondary follicle? Secondary follicle is that part when the formation of theca externa and the theca interna starts forming. Theca externa and theca interna. So these two, remember, are formed in which part? In the secondary follicle. In which part? The secondary follicle. So that is where basically the zona pellucida starts getting formed. And then in the tertiary follicle or the secondary oocyte, basically that is where you will automatically develop the Graafian follicle or the tertiary follicle, where you already get the zona pellucida is already present. So it is not the all stages of the follicle, because primary does not have. Secondary, it just starts forming. Tertiary, the zona pellucida is complete. Okay, so nice question this is, which basically gives you the different stages of the follicle formation and how the zona pellucida is present or absent in different parts. Okay, this you needed to know. Very good. Side effect of oral pills: decrease fertility, ectopic pregnancy, interference of hormone cycles, cancer in all uses. Now remember, these oral pills are basically, either estrogen, progesterone only pills also are available, or estrogen with progesterone as a combination. So whenever you take these pills for a long time, there are chances of hormonal changes that happen. Very often automatically their cycles get delayed. Okay, so basically interference with the hormonal cycles is the firstmost thing that you can expect as a common side effect. Will the oral pill specifically change the fertility? No, it doesn't affect the fertility. Can oral pills be responsible for ectopic pregnancy? Absolutely. Can ectopic pregnancy because of oral pills? No, ectopic pregnancy cannot occur because of oral pills. Ectopic pregnancy occurs because, what is ectopic pregnancy? Occurring outside the uterus. If the zygote gets basically implanted at some other site other than the uterus, so that is a possibility, and those things are possible when there is a fertilization taking place outside. If the fertilization takes place sometimes, in different parts of the fallopian tubule itself, sometimes ectopic pregnancy can occur in the fallopian tubule itself. You can get ectopic pregnancy where basically the zygote comes back into the peritoneum, okay, which is covering the uterus, and so you can get an ectopic pregnancy there. Sometimes there could be structural abnormality of the uterus leading to ectopic pregnancy. So these are all the different conditions where ectopic pregnancy can occur. So what is pregnancy? Ectopic pregnancy. Pregnancy occurring outside the uterus is called ectopic pregnancy. This is also one of the questions that has been asked. Can cancer come because of oral pills? Possible, yes, but not in all users. You cannot say that cancer is present in all the users. But if they ask you this question, that can cancer be one of the outcomes of the using long-term oral pills? Yes, it is possible to get a cancer due to oral pills. Okay, so remember this point, right? Perfect. Good, Maclay. Let me know how your NEET preparation videos regarding this human reproduction, and our RNNEET series has been do catch up with animal tissues, a very important chapter again, which is there as a complete one shot. We have done that in 2 parts actually. You don't want to miss that, because that's going to give you a complete revision of animal tissues. We are going to be there to see to it that, like, you follow, you learn, and then be sure that you get close to 360 out of 360. You are there, and that makes you almost sure of qualifying for your medical entrance, medical graduation seat. So we'll do some matching questions now here. There are interesting matching questions. Though the number of matching questions were very limited in your NEET 2025, there will be some amount of these similar matching questions, or matching questions. From these matching questions, word problems have been derived. So we'll look at some of these questions right here. This is a very important question. It shows you basically different cells that are there: Leydig cells, Sertoli cells, acrosome, and ovum, and you want to know what is one of the main function of each one of them. Nutrition of spermatids, which is responsible for the nutrition of the spermatids. What gives you the nutrition? The Sertoli cells will give you the nutrition, right? We know that the Sertoli cells give you the nutrition. Acrosome. Now you know acrosome has got enzymes, and so therefore that is needed for the penetration. Male hormone secretion, testosterone, comes from the Leydig cells, and ovum itself is your secondary oocyte, right? So this is a very simple match the following, which you got it. Perfect. We'll look at the next question. You see again to match the following, column 1 and column 2. Column 1 says 4 things: LH surge, capacitation, amnion, and relaxing. Column 2 tells you about ovulation, sperm activation, cushions the embryo, and loosens the pelvic ligaments. Okay, you know the hormone that is responsible for ovulation. Very important question. We said that which hormone peaks before ovulation. Though estrogen can also increase, FSH also increases, and LH also increases, but the surge of LH is responsible for ovulation. You don't want to make a mistake in this particular point, that LH surge is what is basically going to give you create the ovulation, right? The ovulation is going to be due to LH surge, right? Capacitation. Okay, what is capacitation? It is a mechanism of sperm activation. Amnion. What does it do? It cushions the embryo. So cushioning of the embryo is a function of the amnion. It produces amnion, amniotic cavity, and you know that as the embryo develops, okay, as the embryo develops, initially you have the inner cell mass, okay, and this side upper portion becomes the amnion, the lower portion becomes the yolk sac. The yolk sac starts to become smaller, the amnion starts to grow around, okay, it starts to grow around this, and the whole thing becomes the amnion. So therefore the amnion grows around the central yolk sac, which becomes rudimentary, and the whole embryo is growing here, covered by the amniotic fluid, which acts as a cushion, So the amniotic fluid acts as a cushion. Relaxin, it is secreted by what? It is secreted by the placenta, and that basically allows mainly loosening of the pelvic muscles, because before parturition, it's a part of the parturition reflex, which we said earlier. Go to previous question where we basically talked about different steps of parturition. You don't want to miss that, because we literally showed you the different steps and told you about how the milder contractions then leads to the stronger contractions, and what is the hormone that is responsible for it. Very important point that you don't want to miss. So just go back to the previous question series of human reproduction and do look out and revise that question quickly. Perfect. We'll see the next question. This is an interesting question which tells you to match the following between this. Okay, so given our chorion, the yolk sac, the allantois and the placenta, and you have in column 2 4 choices: early blood formation, waste storage and secretion, nutrient gas exchange, outer embryonic membrane. Now, there are a lot of these things which are very important to note, not very classically given in most of the books. This is a very, very important question and a rare question. It's important and a rare question. You will want to note down this in your mistake book, because certainly most of you are going to make a mistake in this choice making. Now, which is the outer embryonic membrane? Which part do you think is the outer embryonic membrane? Now, if you look at this, basically the basic embryo, how it develops, you know, it comes from the inner cell mass. Then on the top you have the amniotic cavity, and the bottom is the yolk sac cavity. The yolk sac cavity becomes smaller and evaginates, that is a small protrusion occurring from the yolk sac, and that protrusion is called the allantois. It's called the allantois, right? Done. And this part is the amnion. It starts growing in all directions, and the yolk sac almost is obliterated. So the allantois basically also carries a blood vessel from the placenta to the fetus. But what is the major function? Its role in humans is very less, but the major function of this allantois is actually waste storage and excretion. So the major storage of waste, all the waste products are stored and excreted by the allantois. Okay, which is mentioned as needed as the outer embryonic membrane. Now, while the chorioid goes here, you know that the whole placenta inside the uterus, okay, is governed in the inner aspect of the placenta by the villi, chorionic villi. So this chorionic villi, which are multiple projections around, through which one particular area communicates directly to the fetus, growing fetus, okay, and that particular thing is called the chorionic villi. So we said that the allantois is responsible for the waste storage and excretion. Okay, the outermost chorionic membrane, if you look at this, the outermost embryonic membrane is actually your chorionic villi, which then becomes your placenta. Okay, though placenta is very important basically for all your nutrient and gas exchange. Okay, what is it that actually helps in nutrient gas exchange? The chorion. Okay, the chorion, okay, is responsible for the placenta, or basically the chorion represents part of the placenta, and I can say that the chorion is actually, your chorion is actually your outermost embryonic membrane, and the placenta is responsible for your nutrient and gas exchange. Early blood formation actually takes place inside the yolk sac. So B will be 1, okay, A will become 4, and allantois is C is 2, and your D, placenta, is your 3. D is 3. Right? So you want to probably note down this, because this is a tricky question. Chorion actually is your outer embryonic membrane. Placenta is for nutrient gas exchange. Allantois is waste storage and excretion, and yolk sac is the place for early blood formation. Okay, good question. It's a very, very rare and important question. Nice. So we're going to be doing the last 4 questions, which are going to be totally assertion reasons. So we're going to tell whether choice A, whether both are A's and A, the assertion and the reason are correct, and the reason explains. Both correct, but the reason doesn't explain. C, A is correct and the reason is wrong, or D, A is wrong, assertion is wrong and the reason is correct. Okay, let's look at basically four main statements. First one, fertilization in humans is internal, correct or wrong? Well, fertilization in humans is internal. Well, that is true. Reason, the human sperm can survive in external environment. If the human sperm were to survive in external environment, fertilization would have been external, but fertilization is internal. So which means human sperm cannot survive in an external environment. It survives only in an internal environment and also requires correct conditions and can survive for how long? Only for 24 to 48 hours. Maximum it can survive for 48 hours. So that is why fertilization needs to take place within 48 hours. And so therefore this second reason is false. Right? So A is correct, but reason is false. So the answer would be C. HCG is detected in maternal blood and urine, both blood as well as urine, right or wrong? Put it in the comment box. We saw that HCG is detected in the urine and that's what gives you the pregnancy test. But is it detected in the maternal blood? Yes, it is detected in the maternal blood also. HCG is secreted by the inner cell mass of the embryo. Is it secreted by the embryo? It's secreted by the placenta. So the placenta what secretes? The chorionic villi secretes the HCG, and so therefore placenta is a part of the maternal part, uterus, and so not by the embryo. So this reason is false. A is correct. Again, answer is C. Progesterone maintains pregnancy. Does progesterone maintain pregnancy? Corpus luteum starts secreting progesterone, and once fertilization takes place, it doesn't degenerate, it continues to be present and secretes progesterone, which actually maintains the pregnancy. It is pregnant, so progesterone causes degeneration of the corpus luteum? No. The progesterone then also maintains the corpus luteum, so the corpus luteum does not get degenerated. Right? So A correct, reason false. Amniocentesis can detect chromosomal abnormalities. Is it possible? Yes, you can do DNA testing where you need take basically the cells. What cells? The fetal cells, and identify whether chromosomal abnormalities, especially for detection of Down's syndrome. It collects placental cells from the amniotic fluid. The amniotic fluid will have placental cells also, but it detects the fetal cells and not the amniotic cells. Okay, good. So these are some of the very important questions. बच्चों लोग बहुत अच्छा that you people revise these questions. We have done almost 30 questions. Some match the following questions, some tricky questions, some questions which will give you some better insights. There are a lot more questions that can be done. So we are going to be doing this mix and match where we're going to do some questions. Now that you know some subject, you would have read something, you have some basis through these questions, better insight. Then we're going to be doing one short series again as a good revision, and then follow it up with more and more tricky questions. So don't want to miss this part of RNNEET series. Keep logging in and keep seeing. Basically, we're going to have some of these questions coming up late night. I finish my work with surgeries and everything in the OPD, and then come back late night and sit to basically get enlightened through your in getting involved through you people. So therefore, milte hain, nodta irana sigana. Let us probably learn more together. Thank you.